Hello, Steve here with Phantom History, and thank you so much for your support of the podcast through Patreon. I hope you're enjoying the bonus material I'm providing, and I hope you're looking forward to what's coming up in the future. I also wanted to ask a favor of you. If you know of a friend or a relative who you think will enjoy the podcast and the bonus content, please have them check out the Patreon tiers and see if they'd also like to support the podcast so I can continue to provide this unique experience to everyone. Thanks so much. Hello, everybody. This is Steve with Phantom History, and I'm joined by Ronne D, who is with the haunted Old South Pittsburg Hospital Paranormal Research Center in Tennessee. That is a mouthful. Ronne, can you tell me a little bit about the hospital and what it is there?
Sure. The hospital was a full community hospital. It was a general hospital that was located in South Pittsburg, Tennessee. It was born in 1958. It opened in 1959 and closed in about 1999. It had 4 to 5 different additions put on. Started out as a tiny little community hospital and ended up being 68,000 square feet of a full service hospital for Marion County, the surrounding communities, and became quite of an epicenter for not only for the hospitality or the hospital, but a lot of the locals actually used the cafeteria as a meeting place on Sundays, and so it became a real metro for South Pittsburgh and the surrounding communities.
So it was a hospital and kind of like a gathering place, it sounds like.
That is correct. The cafeteria served food, obviously as all of them do. But a lot of the old fellas used to show up there and talk about, Johnny's baseball game, and it became a real community. One thing that was really neat about South Pittsburgh Hospital, it was when it was born, they actually had the community who actually helped pay to build the hospital. And as time went on and they put additions on, they once again called upon the community to donate money and funds so that they could put additions on, put state-of-the-art rooms in. Even sometimes when they needed medical equipment, the community was called upon to kind of fund the situation. And it lasted quite some time until actually Medicaid closed them down because their billing systems kind of had changed. And the building became quite antiquated, so they put a new one not too far down the road.
Okay, so there's obviously there's still a medical facility nearby, and this building was basically abandoned, I guess, after you said what, the 1990s?
Yeah, it was 1990, right around 1998, 1999, I believe, was the last guest or patient that actually left the hospital. And at that point in time, the actual hospital did shut down. But what they did is they actually made it a drug and alcohol treatment facility, which was on the 3rd floor, as well as a psych treatment area. So that remained for about 2 years after the actual hospital actually closed. And I think the last patients were, like I said, removed and taken to Chattanooga in 1999.
Wow. So before we talk about the building itself and and the land that it sits on, what can you tell me about the community of South Pittsburgh? Where are you exactly in Tennessee? Obviously not too far from Chattanooga.
Correct. We're about 33. We're about 33 miles west of Chattanooga. We're right off of 24 and 72. We're about 3 to 5 miles off of 72, right pretty much on the outskirts. Well, I would say probably in the middle of South Pittsburgh in terms of geographical. But in terms of the city itself, the city is more west, straight from 72. But it's in the foothills of a mountain. It's a very scenic, beautiful looking hospital. When you pull up, you can see the mountains in the background. Very well thought out, very well planned. And it's right in the middle of a community. I mean, it's really, really, there's houses built all around it. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful location.
And I love that, one, because that part of the country is so beautiful anyway, but that the building was preserved. And now it is a paranormal research center. Yeah. So obviously that means there's a lot of activity going on there. At least people have reported that. Is there truth to that? Is the place active?
I've been investigating the location prior to owning it, and I've been investigating it for probably now, I would say about 12 years, somewhere right around there. And she never seems to stop amazing us. It's a very, very active location. As a matter of fact, we had a group in there just this last weekend, and it was great because they came very skeptical. It was funny. It was a husband, wife, and they had come in, and first thing she said is, I don't believe in this. This building's not haunted, blah, blah, blah. As they're actually walking through one of the hallways, the door behind them slammed shut. And she turned around and she jumped and she goes, "Oh my gosh." And our tour guide, Heather, was actually walking down the hall and she goes, "So what do you think now?" And she's like, And then as they're walking a little more ways, they hear disembodied voices. And the lady says, "What was that?" And Heather says, "They're proving to you they're here." And then as they're doing their investigation later on in the evening, they're up on the third floor, which was our surgical suites as well as our psychiatric and drug and alcohol treatment area. We got some amazing evidence on camera where they were walking through a doorway and you can actually see a ghostly figure follow them through the doorway and then just disappear. Caught it all on camera. It is really, really kind of amazing. So yeah, as a believer in the paranormal, which I've been for quite some time, historic Harriman Hospital, or I'm sorry, Old South Pittsburg Hospital. Sorry, I own two locations, and we're right now at the new location.
I see.
The two of them kind of confused once in a while, but no, it's been an amazing ride. I mean, the place is just, and there's days where you're in the hospital and you're walking around going, "Is this place really haunted?" And nothing happens. And as a paranormal investigator, you can go a whole day and not have any activity at all, and you kind of start doubting things. And then I'll walk in the next day to fix a roof leak or do something like that, and you hear things moving around, you hear somebody talking to you, and you're the only one in the building, and you're like, "Oh, I guess this place really is haunted." So yeah, it's quite an amazing building, and the history as you speak is just as amazing as the hauntings itself.
Well, these hauntings, who or what do you think it is? Is it former patients? Is it former employees? I mean, what is still lingering there? Any thoughts on
I think we got a myriad of everything. I think everything from patients to doctors to everybody. I think there's just so much. And what's really neat, and this is one thing that I always talk about when somebody comes through, because I really do love my locations, is hospitals are the only place in the world where everything happens from birth to death and everything in between. So you're talking about a location that's served the community for 40 some plus years, almost 50 years, and all of that energy is trapped in those walls. And when you're in a hospital, there are so many different emotions. There's a baby being born, and you're talking about one of the greatest experience a human can have is birthing a son or a daughter. But then on the other side, you've got grandfather or tragedy that happens in that same location, and that all gets trapped. That energy is still stuck in that building. So you're talking about buildings that can maintain that energy for many, many, many years. Plus, you put, like we talked about earlier, we put a location in that was so community orientated, and everybody in the community was part of that hospital. The doctors, the nurses, everybody. It was such a tight knit community. So when somebody passes away, who's to stay around? Who's to say that they don't stay around to watch loved ones, to care for loved ones, and that kind of thing? And when you work as many hours as the healthcare professionals did in the past, that's their home. That's the place that they really, really have spent the majority of their lives. So yeah, so I believe they're still doing their work. I still believe that a lot of that stuff still goes on.
And it sounds like because of the way the community is structured, that if somebody did pass away, it's probably more than just their family there that knew them. The doctors probably went to church with them or something like that. It sounds like that's kind of that kind of community, it sounds like.
It sure is. It was a real tight community, and even doing some history, going backwards, looking at the newspapers, everybody knew when Johnny hit a home run. Everybody knew when Betsy had a baby. It was such a tight knit community that you literally couldn't sneeze without, five people asking you that you didn't even really know, "Are you okay? Are you sick?" And that's the kind of community South Pittsburgh is. It still is to this very day. I mean, it's really, really kind of neat to be able to be part of that community, and people come up to you and say, "Hey, how are you?" And we'll be doing some lawn maintenance, and somebody will walk up to us and be like, "Hey, I was born in that hospital," or "I had my kidneys, dialysis in that hospital," or so many different, medical things that people have come up to us and said, "Yeah, I spent a month in there. I had this go on." And so, yeah, so I mean, even after, it's not a medical facility anymore, people still want to share their experiences that they've had in the hospital.
Right, exactly. Again, it sounds like it's a member of the community. Now, you said whenever we first started talking that before you purchased the building, that you had investigated it long before then. What was that like for you, and why did you choose to investigate? Obviously, people have been talking about strange things happening there. Tell me a little bit about your first few experiences there and what drew you there.
Well, I'm from Chicago originally. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. So when we come down to Tennessee, or when we were doing our paranormal investigations, we try to line up, make it worth our while. So we would go to a bunch of different locations. So when we come down, we do, South Pittsburgh, we do Hales Bar, we would do some other locations. So South Pittsburgh had always had that. We saw it on the internet, we saw it on TV. So it was one of those locations that were like, hey, we got to go check this place out. And honestly, the first time we went, it was kind of a dull evening. I think as a paranormal investigator, a lot of times there's a trust between us and the residents. I like to call our spirits residents because I think they are residential to the building. But I think there's a time where, there's a feeling out process between the investigator and the resident. And our first time there, it was a little slow. It wasn't exactly what, we were hoping for. But that kind of makes you want to go back because you want to prove that what everybody else is seeing and hearing is true. So we went back a couple more times, and each time we went, it got more and more active. And it was really kind of neat. I think it was the third or fourth time we were there. We were at what's called the Crossroads, which every location has. It's kind of where the Tri-City Clinic meets up with the new area of the hospital. And we were sitting down, and I had somebody whisper in my ear, "Get out." And then I felt kind of a touch to my neck, and I had like what looked like a handprint on my neck. Now, in my opinion, it wasn't anything malevolent or demon or anything like that. We were asking questions. It was the middle of the night. In my opinion, it was either a patient or a nurse or a doctor saying, "Hey, cool it. It's time to go somewhere else." So we got up and we went to a different part of the hospital, got some more activity there. But what really, really convinced me the hospital was haunted or active is that a buddy of mine and I were up on the third floor, and we were doing an investigation. That's where the maternity ward was. Out of the corner of our eye, we both saw a nurse, as plain as day, walk right towards us, kind of stop, look us in the eyes, walk past us, and then open up a door and just disappear. And at that moment in time, I was like, whoa, like that was my first experience with a full body apparition. That was not only a full body apparition, but it was intelligent. She looked at us like with that evil, like kind of like look in her eyes, like, what are you doing? Like it's past, visiting hours. What are you doing on my floor? And I just remember that was the morning I went to the owners and I said, I need to buy this place. I want this because it was such an amazing discovery for me. And that was the day that really solidified my belief in the paranormal because, like I said, it was not only a full body apparition, but the intelligence of that nurse to actually give me that look to say, like, close your, visiting hours are over. It's time for you to move on. It was just really neat. So, obviously the owners held on to it. And then a couple of years, well, actually, I think about a year later, I ended up purchasing the hospital and we've been improving it and haven't looked back since.
And that is amazing to see something like that. There's only a few people who can say they've seen a full body apparition and an intelligent one at that, not something residual. Was she dressed in a certain period or time, or do you remember?
You know what, to be honest with you, I'm not real good with history when it comes to like clothing and nurses stuff, but I would say probably 70-ish, right around there, maybe late 60s, early 70s, kind of that style. I think it was such a shock and awe that you know what I mean, that you don't really take note of. You saw what you saw, but it was kind of that blur. You know what I mean? Kind of like when you get in a car crash and you remember getting in the car crash, but you don't remember the details because it's just such a a shock. And I remember that the other investigator was with me, and one of the general rules of investigating is you never leave your investigator. He was gone. It was so funny. I reached over to grab him because I was scared. I'm not gonna lie. And I reached over to grab him. He was gone. He was like in the break room. And one of the things that is neat about our group when we were together is that we never told each other what evidence we got or saw. We always went to the room and we kind of either drew it or described it on a piece of paper and then switched pieces of paper because this way we don't influence each other in terms of what we see. And so he ended up drawing what we saw and talked about it. We flipped pieces of paper around and we both saw the same thing. And that convinced me because, like I said, we didn't talk about it at all until we got into the break room and then wrote it down on paper because as a group, we didn't want to manipulate each other's kind of thoughts or processes or what we've seen. So it worked out very well that way.
Right. That's a really smart way to do that too, because even if you tell yourself you're not going to be influenced, sometimes you are anyway. You said this was on the third floor where the maternity ward was?
Yeah, it's correct. Third floor maternity ward.
Now, is that where would you say is the most active part of the hospital, or is there a most active part?
I think honestly in Old South Pittsburgh, it's hit or miss. Like, one day, like the Tri-City Clinic area, which is where the ERs were, can be absolutely on fire and off the hook. There's other times where the third floor is on. I mean, it just really, it varies. The hospital has a lot of activity all over the place. So yeah, so it's really kind of neat to be able to be part of that because, like I said, I could be in the middle of the lobby and hear somebody call out my name. We've got a couple of spirits that are really kind of cool in the building, or residents in the building that they will actually mimic your voice. We've had volunteers like who will be working, and I'm in Chicago, working up in Chicago, and they're like, "I could swear, Ronnie, that I heard you tell me to do something." And they're like, nope, I wasn't there. As a matter of fact, we had a public investigation one evening. And when we do the public investigations, I generally stayed on the first floor because I don't want people as a building owner. It's really, really important to me that when people get an experience, that there's no way for them to be like, oh, well, the owner is walking around the building and only God knows what he's got planted and that kind of stuff. So I make sure I stay at the front of the building. This way, when somebody has an experience, they can't point fingers and be like, oh, this is all rigged. So it was really funny. So one night I was at the front of the building, and I don't usually go to the third floor. I just stay off there for personal reasons. But anyways, there was a group up there, and it was a public investigation. One of the ladies took a picture, and they were using a laser grid. And in the laser grid, you can see me perfectly, even the clothes I was wearing that night and everything. And she comes downstairs and she shows me the picture with a timestamp on it. And she says to me, well, when you came upstairs, why didn't you say hi to everybody? And I said, honey, I was never upstairs. And she says, no, that's you. And she showed me the picture, and it was beard, t-shirt, everything to the T. So we pulled the security cameras out. I showed her the footage. I'm like, here's the timestamp on your picture, and here's the timestamp of me, and this is where I'm sitting. And she looked at me and she goes, holy cow. And I was like, yeah, I was sitting at the front door, and the security cameras had me the whole time on video. And I was like, yeah, that wasn't me. I was down here with my staff. And she was like, whoa. And we get a lot of that, a lot of pictures of other staff members who are in a different location of the building, or even voices. And I know a couple of our volunteers kind of named this resident the jokester because he likes to play jokes on people and do stuff like that. So it's really kind of neat.
And that's something you don't hear very often in a haunted location of something, an energy, a spirit mimicking those who are there. I've never really heard of anything like that before. Is this a new experience for you too?
I was really dumbfounded because actually when I saw the picture, it made me question like where I was. Because I mean, you could see the detail of my, my beard and goatee and the little bulbs. I mean, and the t-shirt, it was actually during Halloween, and I had a t-shirt on that said almost Halloween. It was, I think, 2 weeks prior to Halloween, and we were doing an almost Halloween like public investigation. So I had an orange shirt on with a black pumpkin on it and a little black cat, or an orange pumpkin with a black cat. And the picture had my shirt, and that's how clear it was. And I was like, I was kind of speechless at the time. And then the girl who was next to me, her name was Leanne. She's like, well, pull up the security. It was her idea. She's like, pull up the security cameras. So let's see, so we can prove that you're sitting here. So we pulled up the cameras. Our cameras are constantly recording, and they recorded me sitting at the front at the same identical time that this lady took the picture. So
Amazing.
I don't know how you explain that. Like, I truly, truly don't know.
Right. And with security cameras, have there ever been times that you caught something on security camera that you couldn't explain other than that when there's maybe not an investigation?
We have caught like a good example is what we caught the other night with that figure was on security camera. What seems to be what the coolest is on the security cameras during like change or during when they do their rounds, we'll actually kind of see like shadows walk down the hallway, and it kind of looks like nurses or a doctor doing their rounds. One of the coolest things that Old South Pittsburg kind of proved to us that there's life after death is that we had a doctor. His name was Dr. Taylor. He was one of the original doctors of the building. He helped secure the funding, his design of the building. He was a graduate from Vanderbilt University. He was in the top 5% of his class. And he was a pipe smoker, like an avid pipe smoker. And if you remember back in the old days, it was legal to smoke everywhere. I mean, you could smoke in hospitals, you can smoke everywhere. Well, Dr. Taylor was known to actually smoke throughout the hospital. And he was a pipe smoker. And if you actually pull up his name and look at his pictures, he's always got a pipe either in his mouth or his hand. And a lot of times when he would do his rounds at the hospital and somebody was not taking their medical treatment the way they should, he would take his pipe and he'd smack it in his hand and he'd say, I told you, you blah, blah, blah. So anyways, a phenomena started happening at the hospital about 1.5 to 2 years ago, where all of a sudden we would be doing an investigation and you would smell this really sweet smell of tobacco. And now remember, we don't allow vaping or smoking or anything like that in the hospital because number one, it's a fire issue, but number two, because we don't want to contaminate any evidence that might come up. So it was really unique. So we're sitting in the ER waiting area, and all of a sudden, this you can smell it. So one of the girls, her name is Brooke, decides to turn her flashlight on, and she turns her flashlight on, and you can see this huge puff of smoke. It looked like somebody just blew it out of their mouth, and it kind of floats like smoke does, and just kind of fades away. And all of a sudden, it appears again. And this has been going on in Old South Pittsburg for probably the last year and a half to 2 years. We have had all sorts of groups come in, have it happen, experience them. We've got videos of it, pictures of it. We can't figure it out. I actually had a public investigation where we had 15 people in the ER waiting room. We were doing an Estes method. We all kind of sit in a circle, and then somebody sits in the body box and does the Estes method. And he was out, and he was going from person to person, and you could see the smoke trail. And then the smoke trail kind of ended up where I was sitting, and the gentleman pulls me aside and he says, "I know you have this building rigged. Where's the smoke coming from?" And I was like, "No, we don't." I said, I'll pull ceiling tiles down. I'll do whatever you need me to do to, to prove that whatever." He even went as far as said that I had a machine that was on me, that I was actually projecting it. I said, "I'll strip down to my skivvies right now and show you there's nothing on me." And he was like, "Okay." So, I started taking my shirt off because, like I said, I'm very, I want to prove that there's paranormal. I don't want to cheat anybody or lie about anything. So he's like, "No, no, that's okay." Well, it was really, really neat. So then we're walking down the hallway because the tour was actually over. We do everything in hour increments. So we're walking down the hall, and all of a sudden, in front of us, we walked into this big cloud of smoke, and him and I were walking in the front of the group. He goes, "Holy cow." And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "Now, come on. I mean, have the whole building rigged. I mean, we're like, 100 feet away from where that took place." He's looking up going, "Wow." And I said, "Yeah, it's just really a neat phenomenon that happens over at Old South Pittsburgh."
That's amazing, and it shows the influence of that doctor. And it sounds like that's the way he lets himself be known. But it's interesting that he just started like the past year and a half, or at least that you've noticed that was his thing.
Well, one of the things that's really unique about Old South Pittsburgh, and if anybody has ever investigated there, when I had purchased the building, it was in really bad shape. The old owners weren't taking real good care of it. The doctor was a little on the elderly side. I don't think he was real mechanically inclined. So the building was kind of in disrepair. I know when we took it over, there was a lot of situations that we needed to fix. There were leaks everywhere. We put a lot of time. My staff and I put a lot of time in really cleaning up the building. We moved about 100 tons of garbage out of the building. Got rid of the mold. Got rid of just really bad stuff. And my philosophy is that the spirits and the residents are coming back because they're actually to the point where they're proud of the building again. And Dr. Taylor, think about it. This is a gentleman who actually built this building brick by brick from the ground up, secured the funding, secured his life, put his life savings in there. And now he's actually got a group of individuals who actually care about the building, who are putting money back into the building, who are caring about it, keeping the history alive and the true history alive. I think he's proud. And I think he's coming back to actually show the volunteers and myself, "Hey, thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for keeping the history alive. Thanks for telling the truth about the building." And that's kind of what I feel. And that's the reason why, like you said, it's been just the last year and a half to 2 years that he's been back.
That's amazing. That leads to my next question is it doesn't sound like that any of the spirits that are lingering there are malevolent in any way. They all seem like they are okay with you investigating and want to interact.
Right. Yeah, my staff and I spend hundreds of hours a week there keeping up the maintenance and cleaning and mowing the lawn and all their stuff. And my children have been there, and if there was something that was malevolent or bad there, I certainly wouldn't have my children there. But no, everything. But that being said, we all know as investigators that if you're a jerk in real life, you're going to be a jerk in the afterlife. And so, do we have aggressive spirits who sometimes get a little frustrated and, reach out in the ways that you would if you were angry? Of course. But in terms of anything, on the other side or the dark paranormal, I've never had an experience in the building that I would call, dark or demonic or anything like that.
Good. And of course, I always have to ask about anytime I talk about a hospital, about the morgue and those places like that. Obviously, there was one there. Can you talk a little bit about that? What's that space like there?
We didn't really have a morgue. We had a holding facility, which we call the body box. Basically, it's kind of a unique location because it's off the ladies' bathroom in the ER waiting room. So you're basically, as a lady, doing your business in the bathroom, not realizing that there's a thin wall between you and a holder that's holding up to 4 dead bodies. There was only one way in and out of that body box, is what we call it, and it's an exterior door. And what's even more odd about it is the exterior door, and we'll get into something else that's really odd about the hospital. But the exterior door actually faces physical therapy. So the physical therapy wing has windows in it, and it's actually overlooking the body box. So imagine that, you've had a heart attack or you've had some ailment that you've got to be physical and you've got to get on a treadmill or do whatever. And here comes the mortician opening up a door and pulling a dead body out as you're working, as you're working to better your health. One thing that's really, really bizarre about the hospital that I still scratch my head at is that the incinerator, where they would burn body parts, or when they take a tumor out or whatever, was directly outside the cafeteria windows.
Really?
As you're eating lunch or you're doing whatever, the incinerator is on a cement pad that is directly across from the windows of where you and your family are having breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Really kind of a unique design. South Pittsburg, I don't think there was a lot of, as the hospital grew, there wasn't a lot of land for them to do things on. So they started, putting things in locations that today would make you really scratch your head. Back then, I think it wasn't quite as bad as it is today. But yeah, the incinerator pad is directly outside the cafeteria. I mean, sitting right there.
So it's kind of like dinner and a show.
True.
Terrifying. You talked about getting the hospital, up to code, safer, removing the mold. What does it look like now? Does it still have like hospital things in it, beds, wheelchairs, stuff like that, or is it just a vacant building? What is it?
No. So we do have some rooms that have some, some, what do you call it? It's some beds. We have electricity again. We have toilets that flush and work again. A lot of it is pretty good shape. There's no operating tables or anything like that. So, but it is still it's still hospital-esque. So, it's not like an abandoned building where, you walk in and all you see is the shell of the hospital. We still have patient rooms. We still have all that kind of stuff. So, if you use your imagination and you walk in, you can actually kind of see what the hospital looked like when it was operating. We have a full lab that's in the hospital that if you walk in, you can actually see where the refrigerator used to be, where this used to be, because, as time goes by, the tile turns colors because of wear and tear. So you can see kind of where the different devices used to be. All in all, I would say I give the building probably a 6 out of 10 in terms of, condition. It's nowhere near a 10, but I would say it's nowhere near, some of the other locations I've investigated where, you walk in, there's no windows, there's no walls. It's kind of the shell of what it used to be. This still looks relatively like a pretty good hospital.
And that's great. It sets the environment, it preserves some of the history. And if I remember reading on your website, there was some comments about the land that the hospital was actually built on. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So there's a lot of rumors that are going around that there was an ammunition depot, I guess you'd call it, and that the grounds that the hospital were Indian slaughter grounds, and then it became a Civil War slaughter ground. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that we can't find any evidence of any of that happening. And I know that hurts a lot of people because we've had a lot of people who are like, oh, that's why the building's so haunted, because there's so much bloodshed on the property. But we can't find anything. And then there was the Battle of I'm going to pronounce this wrong because I am a Northern boy, so forgive me, Southerners. But Chickamauga was actually a battle that was done, but it was quite a distance away. The closest thing that we had to the hospital was called the Landing of South Pittsburg, and that was quite a ways away too. But that was an area where they did transport a lot of ammunition for the Civil War. That was kind of a depot and a stopping and starting ground for where they would bring things in and out. The Tennessee River is like right down the road. It's probably about a quarter of a mile away. So that was a major thoroughfare for soldiers to walk up and down to follow the river. But in terms of the hospital, when we date back and we talk to the Historical Society, really the only thing that we can prove is that it was a vacant piece of property prior to the hospital, but it was used actually as a city farm. They would farm on the property. The city would, grow a lot of vegetables and that kind of stuff there. But in terms of actual slaughter, we didn't have any of that. And kind of the things that points to that too is that when they put the foundation and when they dug the ground up, if they would have come across anything like that, that's got to be reported.
Right.
All that stuff has got to, and then they would have ceased, the operation. because you have to get the government involved. They've got to ID, you just can't pick up a bunch of bones and throw them down the road. So I mean, if that were to happen, there would have been some set processes by the government, by the state of Tennessee, and all that stuff to remove those remains properly. Because we're talking about human remains here. We're not talking about, deer or antelope or whatever. But you're talking about, we're talking about moving humans. And in that situation, there would have been a lot of write up on it. There would have been a lot of things that would have proved that that was there. So doing the research, I mean, I know that we want to make our buildings as haunted as possible with as much bloodshed and terrifying stuff, prior to the building of it. But so we can't find any proof to that.
Well, that just goes back to saying that, a place doesn't have to have a super violent history to retain that energy. I mean, it was a community space before it was a building, and then it remained a community space as a building. So I think that right there talks a lot about the energy of the land. So a couple other quick questions for you before I let you go. And you may have already answered this. And it's probably your story about the nurse, the full apparition, but is there an instance or a haunting that stands out to you the most in your time there? Is that the one that stands out the most, or is there something else that pops in your head?
I would say probably those two. I would say the nurse and Dr. Taylor. I still, to this very day, the smoke thing, the nurse thing was really, really cool. But when you have the smoke, you have a physical, you know what I mean? I don't know how to explain this, but when we saw the apparition, it was kind of in your mind. It was kind of something that, walked past you very briskly. It was a moment in time. It only happened to me once, in the hospital. Dr. Taylor, the phenomena with the smoke, because you're talking about, I don't even know how to explain it, but you're talking about, manipulating molecules. I mean, there's smoke that's actually more than one person have seen. And then to actually have the smell and to have it just come out of nowhere. We've talked to scientists, we've talked to all sorts of people. It's a phenomena I can't figure out. And it kind of gets to the point, it's almost bothersome because you want to figure it out.
Right. And as you said, it's a shared experience. Multiple people have seen it at the same time, which is absolutely incredible. I know like a lot of investigative teams use different techniques. They use the Estes method, like you said. You have spirit boxes, you have psychics, you have mediums. I'm assuming that there, all those types of investigations happen, right? I mean, all those types of tools.
Yeah, we do. When we have groups come through, people bring, everything from photography to, an Estes method to a REM pod. I'm still a firm believer that my body is going to be the best key or the best tool. A REM pod, you can set it off with a walkie-talkie. K2 is the same thing. When you have an experience like actually seeing the smoke or smelling the smoke, or you have a group of people who see an apparition, and I'm talking a group of people, not just me walking down the hallway and looking and whoa, but when you have 3 or 4 people who can see the same thing or back up the same story you have, to me, I will always rely on my personal eyes, nose, sense of touch, that kind of thing. I think there's a lot of devices out there that we rely on that are accurate to a certain degree, but I think once you put that human element in there and you witness it personally and you have somebody next to you who witnessed the same thing, I think that's what really makes the paranormal what it is.
Right. And when we first started talking, you talked about hearing the get out in your ear and feeling the pressure on your neck. Nothing else is going to pick that up.
Right.
It's you experiencing it. You're so attached to this building, which is absolutely amazing. And it sounds like that part of what you're doing is preserving it, not only investigating it. If somebody wants to get involved to either, I don't know if you're looking for volunteers, looking for people to investigate, what's the best way to proceed to do that, to experience this for themselves?
Get a hold of us at OSPHPRC@gmail.com. Go on our Facebook page at, I think it's OSPHPRC, or Haunted Old South Pittsburg Hospital on Facebook. Or just give us a call. My phone is always on. It's 815-216-5724. I take phone calls pretty much till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I do like to sleep a little bit, but we'll make bookings at 3 o'clock in the morning when people call. Because sometimes you'll be on YouTube and we come up and like, oh, I never heard of that place, and got to call, got to get a book. Right. Yeah, it's kind of neat. But yeah, as you said, I've kind of, the paranormal is what's paying the bills, but really the historic value and keeping the building just alive and keeping it, not from being knocked down into a parking lot or, a new set of condominiums. I think my thing is it's really important to keep the history alive, because there's so many buildings now that the history is just gone. And this
absolutely
is to preserve. And I think that's really what's most important.
Have you ever spent the night in the hospital?
All the time. Yeah, a
Okay.
lot of times. Yeah, a lot of times I'll be working real hard, and it's kind of sad because I'll be fixing the roof or fixing something, you just to the point where you're exhausted, and I'll sit down on the couch. There's actually a couple of couches throughout the building, and next thing you know, it's morning. And there have been times where I have sat down and kind of dozed off, and the only one in the building, and feel a little tug on my shoulder. Time to get up. And I'll look up and go, "Oh my gosh," and head over to the hotel. But yeah, it's like I said, it's an amazing building, and when she's comfortable with you, she'll talk to you and she'll let you know that you're either wanted or not wanted in the building, and it's kind of a neat situation.
And by she, you're referring to the nurse?
No, no, I'm sorry.
Building
She
itself is she.
the building herself. Yeah, my
Okay.
apologies.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's okay. I mean, that makes sense because the building itself sounds like it has its own personality,
Oh,
along with the spirits of the doctors and the nurses and patients, which is absolutely amazing. I can't wait to come check it out for myself sometime in the near or not too distant future, I should say. I'm going to get up there and see it. Anything that I didn't ask you about or an experience that we didn't touch on that you wanted to share before I say goodbye?
no, I think we did very good. I appreciate the
Awesome.
time, and always love talking about the building. So we do have a new location, which is pretty cool. I guess I'll bring that up real quick.
Yeah.
It's actually called Old Historic Harriman Hospital. We're in it now. They're actually shooting a movie here as we speak. So that's what the ruckus was going on in the background. Haunted Discoveries is here. They're doing an investigation and doing a event here, or I guess a film here. But this building is really neat, very pristine. It's in Harriman, Tennessee. It's about 33 miles west of Knoxville. Old South Pittsburg is 68,000 square feet. This building is 186,000 square feet.
Wow.
So it is massive. And it's really kind of neat. Once again, we get to save history and the residents as well. And she's talking too. So it's kind of neat.
Well, we will have to talk again about that location for another episode because I want to hear all about all about that one too. Which I wish we had time for today, but I'm not going to keep you much longer. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and share the story about the hospital. It's absolutely amazing, and I love what you're doing there.
Thank you.
Saving history and also studying the paranormal, which is, two of my passions, especially with this podcast and with this bed and breakfast I'm running down here in Florida. So if you're watching this on YouTube, everybody, check out the comments. I'll make sure those links and those ways to get a hold of Ronnie are available to you. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, visit phantomhistory.com and you can check out the episode there and see some of the links and details as well. Ronnie, thank you so much for talking to me today. I hope that everything goes well with your filming there.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks for having me. Anytime we want to do this again, I'm always available.
Absolutely, and we absolutely will. We have more to talk about. Thanks, Ronnie.
Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, Steve here again. I hope you enjoyed that bonus content. If you have any ideas for an episode or your own paranormal experience you'd like to share with me, let me know through the phantomhistory.com website.